Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Done Said It Show. I am Brian, your host. This week, or actually in this episode, I'm making an observation that I'm seeing that there is a pushback against permissiveness in society right now, in American society, or maybe in general, globally. And we're starting to see an expression of that. Pardon me as I pause for station ID. A little bit of the Aztec juice, cocoa nibs, boiled, added sugar. Ooh, yum. So, this week after the election and seeing reactions of people, people would call it the liberal meltdown. I'm seeing a rise in what's being called the 4B movement, where there are women who are saying we are basically disavowing all sexual and romantic interactions with men. Okay. I'm going to take that and put it into a larger context. There was also videos going around about, I forget what the poison was, but I think there was a woman in Sicily, and I probably should have done my research on this, my apologies, who had come up with the poison and poisoned a very large number of men. And it had to do, I don't know, I didn't read into the background. I just took that as sort of a signal. And there are people that's like, yeah, if my guy voted for Trump, I should poison him. In this election, I'm going to go kind of in the undercurrents of things. I feel like there's definitely been a growing pushback against permissive values in our society. Because I definitely think if you were to go into American culture over the last 70 years, say starting from the 70s, we went from the Leave It to Beaver, the old TV show, Leave It to Beaver values of how we view the world as far as personal expression, as far as maybe politeness or self-censorship. I wouldn't say censorship in the sense of it goes both ways, where you could say what we consider okay to express publicly versus what is acceptable, what the boundaries are on public expression. And we've seen that with a change in, say, like with women, how much, pardon me for just, how much skin we're comfortable with being revealed from like a sexual aspect. I mean, you could say personal expression too, but it plays heavily into sexual expression. What's okay as far as, say, public swearing. 10 years ago, you would not see a public official say something, and I saw this with Pennsylvania, F around and find out. They're talking about like messing around with the ballots and stuff and ballot counts. Uh, we wouldn't see things like swearing in public ads, which personally I think is too far. We shouldn't be doing that because there are kids, if you've been a parent and you're conscientious, the one thing you don't want to expose your kids to is swearing when they're 5 years old. When they're going to get older, they're going to learn about it, but you need to teach them there's a time and a place and different degrees, of appropriateness in swearing when you're by yourself, when you're in public, when you're around different types and different kinds of people. There's boundaries. And I think that I remember maybe it's 2010 when I was taking public transit in Chicago on the bus. Grubhub in its early days, they had an ad where there was a guy who was a scuba diver, and it was something like, it was basically saying, ordering sushi for your dinner, and the fish's reaction was, "Oh, sheep," except it was, just S and then dotted out. And I thought to myself, that's not okay. I that crosses the line. Like, have some consideration for the people that are trying to maintain those boundaries. And I think this permissiveness, you can also look, say, in especially in the US with criminal prosecution. We've become permissive to the point where we were and still are allowing people to commit crimes without consequence. I mean, it was under the marketing package of, well, we want to do it because a certain identity group is going to jail more, is being prosecuted more. Well, that's a consequence of a whole bunch of other stuff that led to them getting there. But that doesn't mean there should not be consequences for doing acts against other people, stealing. You don't need laws to say you don't take what's mine. You don't steal. And the idea that, well, this permissiveness of like not prosecuting people or just making it a misdemeanor when you can steal up to almost $1,000 worth of merchandise has led to lots of repeat offenses. It's led to a big impact, a big impact on retail stores, both the little privately owned things like bodegas in New York City to large chains having to shut down operations or move or take drastic measures where everything is locked up. I think there's a good election joke where someone said, well, stats are down. I think that's when after the FBI in October had released some crime stats, which a week later got revised, where it's like, oh, yeah, hey, here's the revision. Yeah, it's a lot higher than we originally said. We have a situation. Ooh, forgot to change the banner. There we go. And you have a situation where, there was I think it was I don't know if it was a congressman or a senator or someone in political office who sent out the tweet saying crime is good. You should be happy about things. And then the response, I think it was the best response. Someone had a picture, I think it's from a Target in one of the large cities where literally the whole aisles were locked up. And right there in the front of the picture were socks. And the guy's response was the effect of, bro, these are socks. Socks. And he's right. And there's a guy, Cash Jordan. He does a lot of videos about New York City. And during this election cycle, he covered a lot of the stuff, or he's still doing it now, covering things like the issues that are coming up with the migrants, the illegal aliens, how it's impacting things. And also he's doing a lot of videos on the crime where people are stealing everyday stuff like socks, and they're turning around and either selling these products online or at flea markets or on the street where someone's got a blanket spread out. In a lot of instances, kind of sidestepping here, people who are running criminal operations for this, sometimes it's, the South American gangs, the Latin American gangs, they are having migrants saying, you are going to sell this stuff. And they blackmail them saying, we know where your family members live. If you don't do what we're telling you to do right now, which is sell all this collared merchandise on the street, bad things will happen to them. So, I mean, it's just going into a massive circle jerk there. So we've got this permissiveness on crime. We've had permissiveness with sexuality and children, where if you're 12 years old, you cannot get a tattoo, you cannot get a driver's license, you cannot get a job, maybe delivering newspapers. You cannot buy alcohol, you can't fight in the military. I think I said you can't get a tattoo. There's a lot of things you can't do, but you can get literally permanent life-altering sex change operations. I think when it comes to this, and this is where I state my full views for anyone who's doing digging, you should, just like adults, back in the day, you got to wait till you're 18. We have to wait until we're 18 for a lot of things. And I don't think I'll tie this in. And I also don't think it's okay to talk about it. There's nothing wrong with that. People have questions in class, like I was thinking in class, teacher, what's a trans man or a trans woman, and being able to talk about that. But it's another thing to be teaching kids going, today we're going to talk about this. And then, well, what do you think you are? We're introducing ideas to human beings who haven't even gone through the very large identity altering experience of puberty. I think once we get through that, then these things can start coming into play. But before then, no. If you've watched South Park, there was an episode where Butters went to a camp. And I remember it's like they were paired up with people. They had accountability buddies. And I think it was like a religious camp or something like that. And the adults started asking him, are you, something confused? I can't remember what it was. Are you bi-confused? And he's like, gee, I don't know. Am I bi-confused? And they start using the logic chain where all of a sudden where Butters convinces himself, oh my God, I am bi-confused. I need help, which in reality, he didn't. He was perfectly normal. He was perfectly fine. And I think that because you have people who have their values and their ideology, maybe with good intent, maybe with mushed minds, they talk people into thinking, yes, you are trans, you are this, you are that in actuality. And also there's an incentive too with providing the counseling, with providing the medical assistance and procedures and chemicals needed for this process, that there's an incentive kind of pushing things in that direction. And I think when you go back to April of last year, maybe it was April of 22. No, it was April of 23. Wow, how time flies. With the whole Bud Light thing and Dylan Mulvaney, I think that was his name. And that pushback about, having all the trans stuff pushed into people's faces, that was kind of like the litmus of, no, we've gone too far. And it's not saying that people can't live and let live, and people can live this way. If this is how you want to live, fine. I got no problem with it. Just don't push it into my face. Just don't, shove it everywhere. And it was everywhere. It exploded on social media and it was there everywhere. And people got tired of it. They said, no, the degree to which this is in our faces, this is being put forward to us, this is being placed everywhere, it's going too far. And so there is a pushback. And now it's okay. There's still places where, say, as far as educational curriculum, where people are still saying it's still going too far. We want to push back against that. And I think that's okay, because we're not set. I mean, there's always going to be loons that say it shouldn't exist at all. But there's also normal people, a lot of normal people who say, that's fine, just don't go this far. If you want to have, a lot of people, I'll stop on that. And I think with a lot of values, like with sexuality, I think what I'm seeing in regards to abortion is that abortion, when I was a wee lad, was seen as something you did out of a necessity. You're in a bad situation, and so you had to resort to an abortion. Not you chose to have an abortion. Like, to me, the idea of abortion is birth control. Personally, I can tolerate that up to first trimester, because in my mind, you're gestating the body for a conscious being, a soul, if you want to call it that. To once you have that brain, once you have a heart, you have a self-sustaining being that consciousness can enter and become and be this life. And On a side note, too, I saw some stat, but there's maybe 10 to 15,000 elective abortions in, I think, second and third trimester every year. 10 to 15,000. We're a nation of 350 million people, and we're making all this brouhaha over 10 to 15,000. Maybe we should just say you get twice, and you get twice, and then after you get, then after that, we say no as far as legality goes. And I just the idea that we're having this much of a fluff over something so small blows my mind. That all said, with this election cycle moving things along, a lot of women in this 4B movement is a protest saying we have gotten used to this degree of permissiveness. I have set my values to these boundaries, and now these boundaries are getting pushed back. Well, as reaction to it, I'm doing the 4B, right? They're having their chastity protest, which, on a side point, so if you're not going to have sex with men, then you're not going to need access to those abortions anymore, right? Just a point. I know it's going to make some people's heads explode, but it is a valid point. It's like, oh, so abstinence, or, can we also say maybe just do timing around your period if you have regular periods? There's that window where you're fertile, and there's that window where the odds are, you could basically say, yeah, it's going to be smooth sailing. I don't know. People are weird. But the 4B movement, this reaction to it, is a reaction to the boundaries being pushed back, where maybe people are saying we're going too far. We've gone too far. Just like with crime, just like with preteen sex change operations. This is a value that's just gone a little bit too far into permissiveness, and we want to push the boundaries back a little bit, because I'm going to ask, I'm seeing that there is a reaction to my rights of choice are being impeded upon. True. But is anyone asking the questions about what it is or why it is of the choices that we're making regarding that right? Like, should we be using abortion as birth control, or should we be going more in the direction of abortion is something you had to do versus something you choose to do? Like, should we be more conscientious about our choices and our values, that we don't get into situations where we have to choose that, or we should be choosing that, where, and I think that's something that there's going to be a crap ton of noise and a lot of BS, and it's going to be a lot of useless arguments. But that's one of the things I think we should think about, is what is our value system? And should we view abortion as a necessity, or just a frivolous choice that it's okay? Because I think we need to value that it's a procreation of life, and bringing consciousness into the world, a living creature. I mean, you could also ask, how many, someone out there, and I know there's probably that much of the population where this applies to, where there are vegans who say we shouldn't hurt animals, but yet, oh yeah, I had an abortion, or I had 3 abortions, or you could be one of those loons that has one of those celebrating things. I had 7 abortions. Like, God, I really hope that's not the case. But like I said, it's about that small of a population. So most people are normal people, and these are things that they don't necessarily have to deal with, or have a personal, where they're in a situation where I got to deal with this. So yeah, I definitely see, and I definitely feel that with this election, and you can see this globally too, with pushing back, as an additional note, we can see this with Europe and the US in allowing people in under circumstances and using processes or a disregard of processes where you're letting people in from very foreign cultures and you don't take them through the normal process of cultural integration and immigration. And the result is that you recreate those people's countries in your country. You see that, and I'm using a term, it's a generic term, but you can call it like the brown belt that goes people of certain complexion from Morocco all the way to South Central Asia. It's just physical identifier. But people, a lot of those people from those countries, they tend to be in a less developed circumstances. They tend to be not as diverse in the way that, say, Western minds might be, where people are willing to accept people of different cultures, beliefs, religions, ethnicities, etc., etc. But you're bringing people who don't have that same level of tolerance and open-mindedness for those cultural ideas. And the result is the conflict that you see where now Europeans are finally saying, well, we don't want to bring people in this country who don't want to be Italian. We don't want to lose our Italian identity. We also don't want people coming in willy-nilly and just being able to check a box and go, okay, that's good enough to bring in. Like at the US, we've always had issues with human trafficking, drugs coming up through the southern border, people being exploited as far as labor, as far as immigration, as far as dealing with coyotes coming in are concerned and criminal elements. But by opening up the border like it did during the previous administration, it just multiplied those problems multiple fold. So yeah, there was a reaction to saying, look at how much of an increase of crime there is. If there wasn't an increase, it would never have made the news. It would have never been mentioned on social media. It would have been that one random post that would go, oh, yeah, oh, that's a bad thing, man. We should do something about that. Okay, next. But instead, it reached a point where it got as much as attention that it did. And because it got as much attention as it did, it was because it was an issue. It was because it was an issue. It is an issue. So we're also seeing a return to saying we don't want to be permissive as far as how we let people into our country, how we integrate people into our cultures and into our homelands. There's nothing wrong with Italians saying, I want Italy to be Italian. There's nothing wrong with Brits saying, I want Britain to be British. There's nothing wrong with Americans saying, I want America to be American. And it's okay, because if you go to New Zealand, you think they're going to let you just walk in and check a box and go, oh, I'll let you stay in. Yeah, we're not going to do anything. Do whatever you want. No! They're going to say, sorry, we have these forms to fill out. Fill them out. You have to qualify. You want to go to Japan, become a citizen there. You fill out the forms. You need to qualify. You want to go to China. You want to go to Russia. I want to become citizens. Oh, you got a process to go through. And there's nothing wrong. You know, it's great that humans want to help one another, but we need to be mindful of the consequences. And I think that we as a society are going through these steps of learning how much is too much with liberalism and where we should take our lessons learned about how policy and human behavior interact and what those consequences are. And I think we're doing that. It's going to be an ugly, messy process as we push things back and say, yeah, that went a little bit too far. Yeah, that was a little bit too much. Yeah, we need to roll this back a little bit. But it's needed, and we're going to get there. We're eventually going to get there. So it's moving in that direction. How far remains to be seen. How much remains to be seen. In what ways it's manifest remains to be seen. But it's happening. So, all right. I'm going to wrap it up. Yeah, let's go with that. So, thanks for tuning in. What are your thoughts? How do you feel? What are your views? Post in the comments. I'm curious to know. I'm curious to find out what other people feel, what they think, and what you're observing as well. That's partly why I put this out, because I'm taking what I see and observe, chomp it together, and here we go. So with that, and I'm going to see if this end recording thing, what the timing on this thing is with StreamYard. So I'll throw in, be well, everyone. Talk to you soon. And if I need filler, we're going to do that. So end.